As I'm making this video, the Academy Awards are ongoing right now at the Roosevelt Hotel in Los Angeles. When I finish recording this video, I might go and check out if it's being screened. It tends not to be screened on terrestrial TV in the UK or even on All Sky. It's not entire. I'm not sure if I've got access to it, so I know there was a red carpet event or something, but I might check out what's on after this. Of course, it's a long ceremony. It takes place over a good 4 or 5 hours. I want to talk about the political aspects of this, and it's been anticipated that this year's event is going to be the most political ever. Now, whether it is or not, I guess remains to be seen. That would certainly be something if it surpasses last year's politics, because last year, of course, the whole event was overshadowed by the Oscars So White controversy. Um, I just want to discuss this a little bit and some of my concerns on what is being, in my opinion, becoming the traction of the narrative that this event is all about. And I have to say, this is something that I do have some grey areas on. I don't have cemented views on all of this. So there are some areas I'm still unsure about, and I sort of see both sides. Though I have to say, for the most part, I am more of the opinion that it's become too political. So here's my take. I want to discuss the diversity issue as well as actors using it as a political podium. They're related, but they're not exactly the same issue. The other day, the BBC had a live stream event and it had Hispanic, Korean American, and Native American producers. And the BBC man was talking to them about the diversity issue. Now, it was one of these things we have live events so questions can be asked. Of course, he didn't ask any dissenting questions, which is typical of the BBC, and they presented it as they're very subtle about it, but it was clearly biased. It was clearly are the Oscars less racist now? So they're pontificating a contentious opinion, i.e., that the Oscars were racist before. Rather than putting the question, some believe the Oscars to be racist. What do you think? Which would be far more neutral. I put some questions that are more or less similar to the issues I'm raising in this video. Of course, none of them got asked. But I do find with left-wing media sometimes you get a setup where, I mean, in this situation, the interviewer was basically asking them the sort of questions that were very comfortable and very more or less fitted to what their narrative was. And I'm not saying he should have been rude. I'm not saying he should have went in there and asked provocative things. But I do think that if people are making contentious claims, for example, about the lack of diversity, certainly they're entitled to their opinion. But I also think that there has to be a counter narrative, and interviewers need to push them a little bit in some of these claims. I don't think that public figures should be allowed to, or shouldn't put it that way, but if people are making a narrative of oppression, then certainly they should be listened to, but it shouldn't be a case of just sitting there and talking about how awful things are and not really being challenged on those points. And that's a problem I have with left wing media. They they just accept the narrative and they don't hold people, they don't sort of push people a little bit on some of the points. Now, the Korean American director, did say that he wasn't thinking of quotas because that issue was brought up. And again, I would reiterate the concerns I had around, on a much smaller scale, because obviously we're talking about Hollywood here, around the yellow face theatre protest. I think sometimes the narrative I hear from some minority actors, and I'm trying to say this as respectfully as possible, is that, well, frankly, there seems to be contradictory messages because if there is a quota situation, that is to say, if companies, if the film industry is expected to be more diverse, And I think that's quite an ambiguous concept. But if that then goes down the lines of quotas, then a lot of people are going to say, well, it's patronizing. And actually, I'm sure a lot of minority actors and directors and so on wouldn't want that approach because they would know that that then looks like tokenism. And I think it would be, it would be counterproductive for that reason. And yet the claims persist, oh, it's not diverse enough, the industry's not diverse enough. Um, but when you get white actors playing roles that where the characters are meant to be minorities, then there's huge outcries over that because it is taking away the roles, the opportunities for minority actors. And yet, the contradictory message, this is the problem I have, lies in this argument oh, but we're being typecast. Well, actors complaining about stereotyping is a bit absurd because acting has always been about stereotyping, it's always been about portraying a role. So, I find it hard to be sympathetic when an actor is saying, I don't want to do roles that are typecasting a group. Well, wait a second. What what are you in the industry for if you're not portraying a role, an image of a particular role? Now, if you're making a film about, let's say, gang culture in Chicago, of course there's stereotypes in that. But like I said in the previous video, there's truth in stereotypes. So if you're getting black actors to play those roles, they're going to play thugs, aren't they? It's stereotypes, but happens to be accurate stereotypes, or at least there's accuracy in it. Might not be the whole picture, but there is accuracy in that. And I can think of many other examples. If you're playing, if you have a film set in the deep south in the 1960s, you're going to portray white people as by and large backward rednecks. Now, it might be an unfair generalization, but there's a lot of truth in it. Again, it's a stereotype. So I don't really understand actors complaining about stereotypes. Surely it's their job to portray roles. And this is where I have an issue with politicization. Um, but I'm going to try and keep this concise and try and keep the narrative of this video in roughly concise order. Um, in terms of opportunity, I'm not an insider, so it may well be that there are serious opportunity problems. Now, I certainly do understand some of the concerns. For example, if you have a film and let's say minority actors are doing the bulk of the parts, and I'll think of what I'll quote one example of this. 12 Years a Slave was a big film, got a lot of acclaim. When that was marketed in Italy, Brad Pitt was shown in all the posters and he was portrayed as a big actor. Now, Brad Pitt's obviously a world famous actor. There was controversy over that because actually had a very small role in the film. He was on screen for about 5 minutes. Chiwetel Ejiofor, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, was the star of the film. Yet he was given a sideline position. So I think sometimes there is an issue in marketing that there is perhaps too much focus on name recognition, like big studios focus on that. So I suppose the follow up would be how are minority actors who perhaps have slightly more unusual names, how are they supposed to get recognition? Should they change their names? That would seem a little bit, I think that's a bit drastic and a bit unfair to expect someone to change their name just to for their for their skill to be recognized. Um, so in that sense, I think there is an issue, and I can understand minority concerns about issues around that. And again, I'm not an insider, so there might well be problems with casting. But if we look at this year's event, for example, I do find it hard to understand how there can be claims of a lack of diversity. Now, 3 out of the 5 best pictures are focused around African Americans. Fences, Hidden Figures, and Moonlight. That's 3 out of 5 out of the Best Picture nominations are based around African Americans. I'm not sure how people say there's a lack of representation. Even last year, when the whole controversy was going on, Best Director was Mexican, Alejandro Inarritu. There's obviously other controversies over this year's specific event because of Trump's travel order. Um, and obviously, that's leading to certain situations. I mean, you're getting Iranian directors and so on who've been nominated for Best Foreign Picture have been blocked from coming to the event. So I could definitely understand some of the concerns around that. So that's one side of it, the whole diversity issue. I I don't know. Is there enough diversity? Well, the real question is what is the bottom agenda with this? Do you want actors to be nominated for their individual talent? Or do you want them to be nominated as tokenism because of their skin color? Or because of their gender? That's also another issue. I think it becomes problematic and it actually takes away, it's detrimental to minority actors to kind of push this constant narrative they should be there because they are black or Hispanic or whatever. Um, I staunchly believe in meritocracy. I'm a staunch believer in that. There may be situations where you get white actors who are less deserving than certain minority actors, but there might well be other situations where you get white actors who well deserve their nominated position, and that is another side of this. So you could end up with a situation that white actors are being told that they're only getting a role because they're white. I mean, they're only getting a nomination because they're white. So I'm really uneasy with this um, obsessive focus on demographics. I think it should be solely about meritocracy. And I think if someone is pushing this idea, I should get a nomination because I'm black or because I'm a woman. This isn't politically correct, but to me, that's a bit of an own goal. You're self defeating. You know, tell me why you should get the award. Tell me what's great about your film. Tell me what you offer as a director or as an actor. Don't tell me you should get it because you're black. That's just as absurd as if someone got it because they were white. And I staunchly believe that. Um, like I say, if there are issues within the industry of genuine discrimination, that definitely should be addressed. But if it's a case of wanting perfect outcomes, that's just not realistic. You cannot have a situation where it is an absolute perfect reflection of wider society, because acting is a very specific trade. It's a very, it's just naive to expect every single walk of life to have an absolute perfect representation of whatever the breakdown is of wider society. So the US today, unless I'm mistaken, it's a slight majority white, closely followed by Hispanic, then African American. So you're going to have a situation where I don't know what the figures are, but this is just a scenario. Let's say America is 55% white, I don't know, 30% Hispanic, 25% black. Are you then going to expect the situation where Hollywood is exactly reflective of that? I think that's nonsense. As a director, what I would do if I were a director or a producer, I would be looking for the actors who most fit the roles that I want them to portray. I would certainly want diversity because I think that would make the films more interesting and it would mean that more stories are told, but I wouldn't want tokenism. So I think campaigners need to be very careful about this, that they don't go down this line of obsessing over the demographics only, because no matter what their intentions are, that is how the wider public will see it. And can anyone really refute that? If your message is Hollywood's not diverse enough, we need more black or Hispanic or Asian American representation. Okay, there may be an issue with that, but you have to be very careful not to give the message that that representation should be solely because of skin color. It should be because of merit. And the fact is, there are a lot of talented black, Asian American, and Hispanic American people who absolutely deserve recognition. I was watching The Addams Family yesterday. I mean, the 1991 version, and I actually think the 93 sequel was better. But Raul Julia, fantastic actor. He nailed the part of Gomez. Sadly, he passed away in 1994, but just one example of the talent that you can find in the minority community, and many many other examples. So it's not a case that it should be about tokenism, but the irony about this is because of this obsessive issue over not enough diversity, it means that when minority actors are nominated, people are going to turn around and say, oh, they're being nominated because the Oscar organizers don't want to be seen as racist. And actually, one of the organizers, the lady, I forget her name now, but as far as I know, she's Hispanic American. So, you know, that's interesting. Um, I just think campaigners need to be very careful that they don't go down this line where they give the impression that they think people should be awarded because of their skin color. And if that isn't the idea, it's their responsibility to make that clear because that is the message that is being sent out. Now, the second issue I want to discuss is the general issue of politicizing of these events. Um, it's not entirely a new thing. I've just watched the famous clip where Marlon Brando refused his 1973 award on the grounds that he had concerns about the treatment of Native Americans. He famously got a young Apache woman to come up and reject his award on his behalf. Um, and that was controversial. She got some booze, and or maybe he got some booze. Um, Whether he went about it the right way is another, is a matter for debate. Of course, Marlon Brando's image has been tarred in the last year because of his role in Tango in Paris, but that's beside the point. Anyway, that's true. There's always been a political aspect to the Oscars, and I think anyone who thinks that there's no politics at play in the world of Hollywood is very naive. But it is interesting that all these charges of racism and lack of diversity and so on is leveled at a world that is overwhelmingly democratic and left wing. Probably the vast majority of A-list actors today are politically liberal, politically to the left, and yet this is the world that the accusations are flying around. So I find that quite interesting. Um, Here's the thing: I don't agree with those who say that actors should shut up and never have an opinion. I think they're entitled to their opinion as much as anyone. They're American citizens. They're entitled to the First Amendment. And being privileged and rich doesn't mean that they should not have an opinion. And if they are, for example, starring in a film that is clearly about social issues, then it may be appropriate to specifically address those issues. But I do think it can be problematic if this award ceremony starts to turn into something else and it starts to simply become a podium for political speeches. And I think that's starting to happen. That is the impression I get. Now, I don't know what's going on right now. I'm going to watch the event, like I say, afterwards. And it'll be interesting to see whether, um, apparently Jimmy Kimmel's hosting this year. So I don't know if he's got a touch on that or not. Um, but, I think if it turns into something else, that's going to be unfortunate because people are going to be put off that. What people in the entertainment industry need to remember is that first and foremost, the public have helped to get them where they are. Partly it's their own hard work, of course, but without people who go to see these films, they wouldn't have, the fortunes that they have. Um, and I think the vast majority of people who go to see films go for escape, even with more thought provoking social history films. They go for escape. I don't think people go to either the cinema, the movie theatre, or to award ceremonies, or watch award ceremonies for that matter, to listen to lectures by multimillionaire celebrities. And the thing is, it's not that they're talking about themselves necessarily, but I think sometimes they need to understand that when they're pontificating about issues like diversity, about it could be anything. Um, the average Jill or Joe sort of gets this impression, well, you're living a very privileged life, and you're preaching about, telling the common man what to think. I think that is the impression that could be sent out. But whether that's a fair impression or not is another matter. Um, of course, there's the other side of it. If actors never said anything, people would also accuse them of being privileged and out of touch. So suppose they need to strike a good balance. But if, for example, actors get up tonight and just spend the whole time attacking Donald Trump, what's that going to do? All it's going to do is marginalize half the viewers, i.e., Republican voters, Donald Trump supporters, who might just be watching the ceremony because they want to see who's won, because they just, you know, uh, like the entertainment side of it. So I think actors need to be aware of that. I guess what I'm saying is, if you're going to be so political, then run for office. There's nothing wrong with people having political opinions, but I also think they are first and foremost actors or directors or producers, and they need to remember that. Um, because by constantly politicizing it, I think it gives a certain impression that they're trying to turn the event into something else. So I suppose the line I would take is they're entitled to their views, and certainly I would never say they can't have an opinion. But I do question, is the awards ceremony the right time to do it? I think maybe it's better to do it at other times. Um, because tonight's event surely is just about awards. It's just about, recognizing people's achievement in the industry. So I think to turn it into such a politically charged thing is going to totally change the meaning, and people are not going to like it. And the final point about the whole issue around diversity, actors make it out to be a really grave situation. We live in a world where there is war, there is famine, there's severe human rights abuses. Now, to me, those are far graver issues than if, frankly, a minority actor doesn't get exactly the role he or she wants. Um, or if, yeah, you get the point. Um, Final few words. I heard yesterday that Bill Paxton died. Um, I remember him from his role as Brock Lovett in Titanic and his lead role in Twister. Only 61, he died from complications following surgery. So I imagine there's going to be tributes to him and the late John Hurt, perhaps on Puri. Not sure if on Puri done many Hollywood films, but yeah, usually there's a segment in memorandum. So we'll see what happens. Maybe his passing has been too recent. Maybe that will be covered in next year's event. Anyway, I'll leave it there. There's I'm sure many other areas to look at. I might make a follow up depending on how things transpire. Talking about the awards themselves and maybe some follow up to this. Let me know your thoughts and thanks for watching.